Can you see it again?
Yes, madam.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so we were discussing about the first case scenario and we highlighted the important areas, important signs, symptoms or things in history, right? So you will always have to highlight those things to provide a good answer, right? So we underline the severe left iliac sapate and period of amenorrhea. Have you heard of period of amenorrhea before in physiology? And do you know the meaning?
Yes.
Can anybody answer me?
Yes, madam, we have heard of.
Right. So, and after that, you have been given the duration as well. And there are again a group of signs and symptoms. It says that she was severely pale and she had tachycardia, low blood pressure. All those things signify something, right? They do say that there is blood loss, right? Maulange questions are there because it will be a waste of time, right? All these things, only few people will answer. So at least try to learn from now onwards how to analyze a case scenario, right? So spend some time to read it. You will always be benefited by it, right? So the scenario says she's pale, tachycardic, there's low blood pressure. So when these three come together, you obviously know that there should be bleeding somewhere, either outside or inside, right? And at the end of the scenario, you have been given, says that there's a collection of blood in the pouch of Douglas and also the reason for bleeding, reason for internal bleeding is being given. So when you analyze the entire scenario, you have almost everything there, right? Nothing for there to work out except the questions that we are going to formulate with it, right? So shall we move on to the next? Sorry. Right. Sorry, I forgot to remove these things. Okay. Right. So what's the first question that we ask? List the normal sites of implantation in the uterus. That is 1.1. Right? So when you are answering the questions, again, you will have to just have a look at two things. One is, the verb, right? Number one is the verb and the amount of marks that has been allocated. Always those two things will give you some sort of clue, right? So when we ask you to list things, you don't go on describing it, right? Because there's a disadvantage of spending more time unnecessarily and you will be writing a lot of unnecessary stuff, right? So just have a look at the marks. The marks will tell you we are asking something simple. If you are not sure about the verb, right? So listing is listing. We can ask you to list or enumerate 1, 2, 3, 4 like, right? Or we can just ask you what are the normal sites of implantation in the uterus. So those are simple words. Therefore, your answer should be simple. So according to the Landmark's embryology, the book says the normal sites of implantation are anterior wall of the body of the uterus, and and the posterior wall of the body of the uterus. Right? So you can see each answer carries 5 marks with the correct answer. Right? And we have asked you the normal sides. Of course, there are many other sides and they are not normal. Right? So always when we formulate a marking scheme, we formulate according to a textbook, recommended textbook, right? So according to your textbook, these are the 2 answers, either anterior wall or posterior wall of the body of the uterus, right? So your answer should be complete. The part body of the uterus should be there, right? And anterior and posterior wall. So you can write both these things together. Give me 1 second. Right. Right. So that is the answer for first part. Are you all with me?
Yes, madam.
Hello. Right. So answer to 1.2. The question is explain the anatomical basis for severe bleeding observed in this patient. Outline in the blood vessels responsible. Right? So here, the amount of marks that is being allocated is 20 marks. Right? So you will have to build up your answer in a stepwise manner. Right? So it is obvious that there is severe bleeding in this patient and there should be some blood vessels responsible. So you have to tell us what is the anatomical basis of severe bleeding. Right? So focus on anatomical aspect. Right? So I have formulated an answer for you. Your answer may be slightly different. Doesn't matter. If you have all the points that is necessary, that would be enough, right? So my first sentence, just to make sense about this scenario and to tell my examiner that I know what is happening, right? So at the beginning, there should be a sentence like this. To bridge the gap between your anatomical basis and what you are going to talk about this, and it will tell your examiner that you know this, right? So that is the whole idea about it. You score marks, still papers are being marked by humans now, right? Essay paper is still being marked by people, right? So your first sentence had a lot of impact, right? So when your first sentence is very strong, sometimes you might not be able to build up the argument in the latter part well, right? But your first sentence gives the impression to the examiner that this person, this candidate knows something about this. So therefore, the sentences like this is important. That is why I have put it there. It tells that the ectopic pregnancy in the tube does not provide adequate space for the embryo to grow. That is why it ruptures now, right? So it ruptures and results in heavy bleeding. So if something like this is there, right? So for the moment, I will give it 1 or 2 marks. Let's say 1 mark. Either this one or this one should be there, right? Then you have to tell us, because we are asking about the blood, asking you to outline the blood vessels responsible. So you have to tell us what are the blood vessels that would give rise to bleeding, right? So you have to mention them, ovarian artery and uterine artery. So just mentioning them would give 2 marks each. Always remember when you come across a question like this, you have to write about ovarian artery and uterine artery, little bit of detail later. But before that, you just highlight these two. Then it is easier for the examiner to give you marks, right? So you say there are 2 blood vessels supplying the female reproductive system, ovarian artery and uterine artery, right? Shall we move on to the next slide?
Excuse me, madam.
Yes.
Madam, if I tell like now in the second week, madam, the endometrium starts to get embedded, no, madam. Sorry, blastocyst starts to get embedded, no, madam.
Yeah.
So there is like penetration by the tropoblastic cells, no. So fallopian
Yes.
tube is not that
Yeah.
thick enough to bear that. Therefore, the wall gets ruptured because of that.
Yeah.
If I give you that comment, is it wrong, madam? That concept?
Much better. Remember, what I am giving you is the least number of sentences and just a summary of this answer. You can add all those things what you said will add color to your answer. Right? So if you have time, if you can manage your time, you can elaborate this answer and fetch it up. Right?
Okay.
You're correct.
Okay, madam. Thank you, madam.
But you should have adequate time to do that. Right? So my answer is just the skeleton of it. And it includes the must-know things. There are quite a lot of things that you have to, you can add here. Right? Changes in the endometrium, lacuna formation, changes in the vessel wall, all these things are responsible for this heavy bleeding now. Right? But be mindful when you are writing an answer, it should contain the essential information. Right? All those you can accommodate provided that you have adequate time to spend. Right? You have about 8 or 10 minutes to write this part now because the entire question is half an hour. Right? So you can spend about 8 minutes to write this part. Right? So you don't have to write a lot of unnecessary details, but the necessary things that will add on color to your answer. Am I clear to you?
Yes, madam.
Right.
Thank you, madam.
Right. Then I'm going to talk about the 2 arteries a little bit. Sorry, there's a space here. It should be ovarian artery. Arises from the aorta and enters the suspensory ligament of ovary and continues in the broad ligament to supply the uterine tubes. Right? Here we need to know whether to find out, from where this ovarian artery begins. And a rough pathway, simple pathway, how it goes along the broad ligament. Right? That is why we have given 5 marks there. There are a lot of details again here. This is the essential skeleton. Right? So always remember to manage your time. Don't go to town about it. When you get something you tend to write more. Right? So therefore you will get always distracted. So be mindful about it. You have 5 questions to answer. And always try to manage your time, right? Don't try to write everything you know because there may be some other question that you do not know that much and you may have to refer and study and think about. You can do all these things when you are practicing, but at the exam you cannot do that, right? So you have to be relaxed to answer the question that you are not very familiar with. For that purpose, you need a little bit more time. So always try to save time, right? I'm not telling you that to write always very short, simple answers. Your essential facts should be there, but always be mindful about the time. Right? So if you practice answering these questions, so those who have practiced answering this paper for 1 hour period would realize this. Right? Right. Then secondly, I've said that ovarian artery ends by anastomosing with uterine artery. This sentence not necessarily should come here. This can come at the end of the description about the uterine artery. Anywhere you wish, but you have to mention that ovarian artery anastomoses with the uterine artery. That is one of the main reasons for heavy blood loss, no? Because there is rich anastomosis. Right? Therefore, I have given 5 marks for that. Right? Then I am talking about the uterine artery just as I talked about the ovarian artery. Right? Uterine artery arises from the internal iliac artery and runs in the root of the broad ligament, turns up superiorly and run along the lateral side of the uterus, and it runs along the uterine tubes as well, and finally anastomoses with ovarian artery. So essentially, when we are talking about these two arteries, we must know from where they arise, their course and distribution roughly in the broad ligament, and the fact that both anastomoses. You can see that out of 20, yes, I have given you about 15 marks for that fact. Right? Because majority of the marks are there. Right? So it indicates you that this is the most important part in the answer. Right? So I am telling, therefore the tube receives rich blood supply from both sources. You might see there are certain sentences that has not been allocated marks because when we go on reading your answers, in actual situation, we cannot adapt strictly to the marking scheme. Right? So these are provided as a guide for us. We prepare the marking scheme as a guide, but we cannot always follow it because you write all sorts of different things. Let's think about 200 people writing 200 different things. So there is a flexibility always. Therefore, there may be few sentences. In some people, they will get marks for them. And for some people, if they have written the rest additionally, they might not. Right? So always try to write about what is most important in this case. Right? So as you said at the beginning, the changes in pregnancy, the penetration of syncytium into the lacunae and increased blood flow, which is observed around the 13th day of intrauterine life, all those things, the physiological changes in pregnancy. I have underlined this because these 2 marks are not there in the marking scheme. That is additional to the marking scheme. So anybody who has not written the essential parts, if you write a sentence like this, we can reallocate those marks to that sentence. Right? So this does not mean that you can write anything, right? Any lot of details about things, but if you don't remember or fail to mention an essential part, and if you have written something like this, we might offer you marks. Right? Okay. Then finally, I personally like you drawing diagrams. Right? At the top of the paper, we usually provide illustrations wherever necessary. Right? You are encouraged to provide a diagram for gross anatomy questions, not only when we ask about relations. When we ask about blood supply like this, is a very famous picture that Everywhere when you mention about, just mentioning about the female reproductive system, this diagram comes up, right? A detailed diagram that will show how the uterine artery and ovarian artery anastomosis, right? So at the end of your answer, if you draw something like this is a very easy diagram to draw and very easy thing to remember. There are many such diagrams in many systems. So if your examiner sees something like this, a properly labeled good diagram in a gross anatomy question, it's always favorable. So always, if you have time and if you can manage the time, the outlook of your answer will be much better if you draw a diagram, right? Clearly labeled, nice diagram. Okay, not only for histology and embryology, right? Right, so that is our answer to part 2, right? 1.2. Shall we move on to 1.3? This again, I think I have slightly modified the original question, and you can see the amount of marks that is allocated is 30. This is the gross anatomy question, right? Gross anatomy part of this particular question. So we have asked you to describe briefly the supports of the uterus, right? So there you can formulate your answer in any way you want, but highlighted here are the core content that we expect you to provide. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට answer එක ඕන විදිහකට formulate කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right? Those who have joined now, please enter your registration number to the chat box and the name, right? So that I can mark the take the attendance, right? Batch is here. No idea. One moment, please. Right? So what are the things you should know here? When you're talking about the supports of the uterus, here I have classified them. You can use your own classification, but if these facts are highlighted anywhere in your answer, we will offer you marks. So what are the things you should know? I have highlighted the muscular, fibromuscular, and ligamentous and positional supports of the uterus, right? So that sentence will tell us that you know something overall about this, right? So that is why I included it. Anybody reading your answer will get that idea that this person knows something, right? Just like in the previous question. So any combination, anything, I have offered 2 marks. And you have to tell us that you know that there are strong supports and weak supports. Some of the supports are very strong, some of them are very weak, right? So you have to show us that you know that, right? Then about each of these components, obviously you have to talk about levator ani, right? So some books says levator ani is the strongest support. Most books say so, right? but there are variations in different textbooks. Doesn't matter. One lever tena is one of the most important, right? So that is why I have given you 5 marks. Remember that you have to describe this, right? The origins, how the muscles of the two sides come together, and how it forms a pelvic floor, right? So just mentioning lever tena, I will not give you all 5 marks, right? So you have to describe it a little bit, right? Then positional changes, anteversion and anteflexion. This is again, you have to say, tell us what is anteversion, and you have to tell us what is anteflexion, right? So if you have tell all these things, you will get about 5 marks for that part. Then about the perineal body and the structures around location of the perineal body, right? What it is, and the surrounding muscles that attaches to it, right? A little bit about it. The mentioning perineal body will give you about 2-3 marks, right? Then we'll be talking about the ligaments. And you have to tell us that you know the ligaments are condensation of pelvic fascia, right? So that is why I have given you 2 marks for them, for there. And then you are talking about each and every ligaments. The transverse cervical, pubocervical and sacrocervical. And you have to tell us from where to where they go. That is why each and every one is being given 3 marks, right? So when you are talking about transverse cervical, always mention the other term, cardinal ligament, because it is a generally commonly used term, right? And it also provides fairly strong support, right? And at the end of your answer, you mention a bit about the broad ligament, anatomy of the broad ligament and round ligament of the uterus. And at the same time, don't write a lot of details about it, right? 2 or 3 sentences, and you mention the fact that they are weak supports. Again, you are telling us that you know something about it. Similarly, when you are talking about levator ani, you have to mention that it's a strong support. If you want, you can write. Nobody will deduct marks if you say this is the strongest support, right? But some books does not consider it as the strongest one. But anyway, it's a very strong support. One of the major strong supports to the uterus, right? And I think you will get the total of 30 there somehow, right? So this question you can score very easily. But here again I have given skeleton. Skeleton එක තමයි දීලා තියෙන්නේ. On this you have to build up your answer. So if you are writing your answers, you can, according to the marking scheme, you can read your answer and you can offer marks, right? And here also, I think you can give a better view to your examiner if you draw a diagram like this, right? In the previous ones also, this one shows the ligaments only, no? For the levator ani and for the anteversion and anteflexion, if you show your examiner, this is anteversion and this is anteflexion with different axes in the uterus and the vagina, I think anybody would tend to give more marks to you, right? Are you all with me?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Right. Give me a button. Right. 1.4. Embryological development of the uterus. 20 marks. So these are again very simple things. If you know and if you have studied, you can answer, right? So what are the steps that we offer you marks? Sorry. Uterus develop from the paramesonephric ducts. And where do they originate? They originate as a longitudinal invagination of the urogenital ridge. The name urogenital ridge should be there, right? At least. And the fact that they are located lateral to the mesonephric ducts, right? You know that mesonephric ducts are male genital ducts and paramesonephric ducts are female ones, right? So they are located lateral to the mesonephric duct. And then we are talking about this tube. The upper end or cranial end opens into the peritoneal cavity. And when you come down, if you look at the picture, you can, Here, they come down, crosses the mesonephric ducts and unite in the middle, right? And when they unite, the initial partition between the two tubes are there, right? So when it persists, sometimes you get biconjugate uterus and compartmentalized uterus, different congenital anomalies. But normally that partition is separate. And the two combined ducts will project into the posterior wall of the urogenital sinus. The tip of the two combined ducts, the point is called the Mullerian tubercle, right? And here I am talking about the two parts. First two parts that will form the uterine tubes and the third part that forms the uterine canal. We are now talking about the fate of each part. First, you talk about the orientation of each part, right? The location, where do they originate? The location in relation to the mesonephric duct and how they come down and process the mesonephric ducts, and the two ducts on the opposite side unite in the middle, right? Then you are talking about the fate of the three parts, right? Cranial part, horizontal part, and the caudal part. Cranial part and the horizontal part, which is this part and this part, will form your tubes, obviously. And two caudal parts on either side unite in the middle to form the future uterus, uterine cavity, cavity of the body of the uterus and the cavity of the cervix of the uterus. And this is the tip that, joins the posterior wall of the urogenital sinus, right? So all these tubes will give rise to the lining, right? That forms the endometrium later. And you have to add on the myometrium and perimetrium to that, right? Surrounding mesenchyme or mesoderm will form the myometrium and the peritoneal lining will form the perimetrium, right? And a mark for 2 for congenital anomalies. You have to name one, or if you can name at least one congenital anomaly, it would be enough for a question like this, right? So that is how we are going to outline the embryological development of the uterus. And here also, I prefer a diagram. because you can express things better in a diagram than solely with words. Right? Shall we move on to the next part? Last part of this question. Draw a label diagram of light microscopic appearance of uterine tube. 20 marks again. So here, sorry. Right? So remember again, it's only to draw, not to describe. So remember, when you ask only to draw, just draw the diagram. Right? It should be labeled. The arrows there, right? I just put the things that you have to label. Arrow should point out to the place that you want to point out, right? And you have to name your figure. Figure legend or labeling your figure, right? It's very important, right? So what are the things you have to label? Number one thing is your diagram should be clear, right? And the outline of major areas should be clear, right? And the labels should not overcrowd the vicinity, right? Sometimes you go on labeling one on top of the other. It's very difficult to read, right? So your zeros should be correctly drawn, clearly drawn. Correctly drawn, it should be clearly drawn, and anybody who see it will understand it is zeros. Then you should draw the muscular wall. It's not very thick. Muscular wall. And if you want, you can write within brackets, it's formed of smooth muscles, no? Right? So nobody can deduct marks if you do it that manner. Then you have to show the mucosal folds clearly. This has a characteristic inside appearance due to this extensive folding, no? So you have to show that to your examiner, right? And your supporting lamina propria should be there. And your lining epithelium, right, should be marked correctly, and you have to mention what the lining epithelium is. Simple, columnar, ciliated epithelium. Because this is only site in human body where you have this epithelium except the hair cells of the ear. Right? Simple, columnar, ciliated. You have to name the epithelium as well. Right? So that's all. You can do all those things in this diagram. Right? Don't write paragraphs under the diagram describing it. So when we ask you to draw something, we don't read the paragraph. We are looking at your picture and how capable you are to represent the theory knowledge in a diagram. So when you want that only, we ask you to draw a diagram. Right? Not only in histology, gross anatomy also sometimes we might ask you to draw diagrams, because it is a better way and easy way to find out whether you have comprehended something clearly, rather than reading a long essay. Right? Okay, so that's the end of the first question, and I hope you can mark your own answer and identify the gaps and crevices in your answer. Right? Okay, shall we move to the next question answer?
Okay, madam.
Right. And Katya Nidida, I don't know. Right. This is again a very short case scenario we have given, I think, the last time, right? So it says a 50-year-old male with poorly controlled diabetes presented with severe pain in the perianal region, right? Examination findings revealed a perianal abscess located in his right ischiorectal fossa. So some books now use the term ischiorenal. Therefore, we have included both, right? And nothing much in this scenario. We have added diabetes here because to make it a real scenario, because each and every person will not get this type of abscesses. No, these are usually common among diabetes, right? People with diabetes, because their immunity is low and they can easily get infected, and because of the high sugar level, the infections in them are not really controlled well. So that is why that type of people will get this kind of abscesses, right? So that part is added to make this scenario a bit realistic, right? So it's a very simple scenario and you have been given the diagnosis, right? So number 2.1 is using your knowledge in anatomy, list 4 surrounding sites that this abscess is likely to extend. 20 marks. Again, look at the verb. We are asking you to list. And we have given you 20 marks. Because this listing is not that simple like the listing before. If you remember the first question in the previous question, you can get it directly from your memory, right? But this listing involves more than that. You have to work out things to list these 4 sites, right? That is, they are not listed in your textbook. You have to work out. That is why we have given you, offered you 20 marks for that part, right? So to give this answer, give the answer to this part, you should know the location of ischiorectal fossa and the structures in vicinity. And not only that, where you can extend this abscess. Right? දැන් මට ඉතින් structure එකට මේ access එක යන්නේ නැහැ. Right? So where you can extend. So quite a lot of things are involved. That is why this listing involves 20 marks. Right? So there may be such questions as well. Like I have selected these 2 different questions for you all to show the difference. Right? So you have to use your gray matter when you're answering something like that. So what are the structures that it could spread? Left ischioanal fossa or left ischiorectal fossa, and it will tell you, if you write this answer with the side, it will tell us that you know the right-left communication, right? Inner canal, perianal skin, right? So your abscess can break into either inner canal or perianal skin, like a fistulous tract, form a fistula, and discharge into both these surfaces, right? And posteriorly, it can extend into the gluteal region, and also it can go up into the pelvic cavity, right? So other than that, if you have mentioned the rectum instead of anal canal, we have given you marks, but there should be a rationale. Method communicate වෙන යන්න පුළුවන් තැනක් වෙන්න. So we have given 4 marks for each answer that constitute 20 marks. right? So you can mark your answer now. Then 2.2, we are asking you to list the boundaries and contents of the ischiorectal fossa. Again, a little bit similar to the previous question, but here you will have to list all possible relations, and we have given you 25 marks for that. So, laterally, you know that you have the obturator internus with its covering fascia, right? So, if you have written only obturator internus, you will get 1 mark. And if you have mentioned the fascia, you get 2 marks, right? That is how the marks are being divided, right? So all possible directions are there: lateral, medial, posterior, anterior, flow, everything. Because roof is again the lateral and medial walls coming together at the top, right? If you wish, you can mention that fact also. When you have flow, you should have a roof as well. No? You can say roof is the, sorry, I forgot to add that. It's these two walls joining up to form the roof, right? So medially, you have the 2 relations, one above and one below, right? Above you have the levator and below have the external anal sphincter. Posteriorly, you have the sacrotuberous ligament, gluteus maximus. Any reasonable relation posteriorly would also be accepted here. And most important things have to be mentioned. Anteriorly, you have the urogenital diaphragm, and the flow is the perianal skin, right? And you have to include the content as well. You have to mention about the fact. And if you specify the fact, lobulated fat, you specify it, that it shows that you know something about ischiorectal fossa again, right? And inferior rectal nerve and vessels, obviously, you know these things, right? And the pudendal nerve and the internal pudendal vessels. Some people write it as a content of the lateral wall, and some write it as a content within the ischiorectal fossa. Anyway, if you have written it, you will get about 5 marks to both the pudendal nerve and internal pudendal vessels, or internal pudendal artery and vein. Okay, that is how you get your 25 marks. Clear?
Yes, madam.
Right. Right. 2.3 is draw a label diagram of longitudinal section of anal canal. Again, unfortunately, I couldn't find a complete diagram that contains all these things. Right?
Recording in progress.
So therefore, I have just find a reasonable one. This one also missing that external anal sphincter 3 parts. Right? So again, it's to draw, and you have to name your figure longitudinal section of anal canal. Okay? Are you all with me? Lamai?
Yes, madam.
All right. Well, other people, I don't know what is happening. No idea. Right? So here are the things that you have to mark in the diagram with an arrow. And if you are marked only, you will get the marks. Right? So what are the things you expect? Pardon?
Madam, your line getting interrupted, madam.
On, I can hear you.
Okay, madam. Now okay, madam.
Right? Right. So this is the marking scheme for the diagram. We should see that there are three parts. 1, 2, 3. Right? One mark, 2 marks, like that. Right? So even if there's nothing but three parts are there, we will give you 3 marks for that. And you should mark the pectinate line. You should mark the anal column. Each will get 1 mark. Then the anal valves. Then the white line. Right? All these lines, valves and columns. Right? And you should show us where the internal anal sphincter is. Right? Or circular muscle layer of the hindgut, anything. And you should show the anal sphincter, external anal sphincter, and these 3 parts should be there. Right? Subcutaneous, superficial, deep. Right? In addition to that, showing us the longitudinal muscle layer. You know that it comes and splits up and has several attachments now. If you are shown that, another 2 marks. And finally, if your diagram is clear, with proper labeling, overall we offer you 2 marks. Right? So even though you have missed 1 or 2, you can score there. Right? This diagram, as I remember, most of about 60% of you have answered this well in the exam. So this is one of the very important diagram. Till the last day you practice as a doctor, this is important for you all. So better learn it. And you have to label the diagram and label all the layers and things. And this is how you get marks for the labeling. Right? Okay. One thing, we add this, the overall clarity of the diagram, because in histology you generally don't add such marks, but in gross anatomy, it's a complex area now. You should know the 3 parts and you should know where they are. And they should be located according to the proper order. Right? Right? Right. Then describe briefly the light microscopic appearance of rectoanal or anorectal junction. Here you have to draw the diagram and write a brief description as well. Right? So in histology questions, a diagram carries marks. Whether we have asked you to draw a diagram or not, you have to draw the diagram in histology and it will carry a designated amount of marks. Right? Then මේ ළමයා ඇදලා තියෙන diagram එක විතරයි නම් and it is a properly labeled clear diagram නම් he or she will get 5 marks. Right? So what are the things we must accept in the answer now? You should tell us about the transition of epithelium, the changing of simple columnar glandular epithelium into the stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Right? And you have to write something about this simple columnar glandular epithelium, the presence of tubular glands, right? Nature of the epithelium, right? And the presence of goblet cells. You have to mention all these things, right? Because describing that epithelium will carry, you can see 5, 6, 7 and 8 marks. right? And then you move on to the other epithelium, stratified squamous non-keratinized. You have to mention about multiple layers because the other epithelium has only one layer of cells, right? And the changes of this epithelium within itself, basal to superficial. The cells will have different shapes, no? There will be spiral-shaped cells in the middle and squamous cells on the superficial surfaces, right? And the fact that there are no glands. And in this part, there are no skin appendages as well, no? This is the second part of the inner canal you have, right? Sorry, first part. On the second part, you will have the skin appendages. So the fact that there are no skin appendages and no glands, you will have to mention there, right? So basically, it's a very simple answer. Your answer should have the sentence that there is a transition of epithelium. Epithelium changes from here to there, right? Transition, that is a technical term that we use, right? And you have to indicate, if you have indicated the point of transition, much better, right? Like this in this diagram. And then you have to label all these things and mention, describe about the two types of epithelia that you will see here. That's all, right? So that will constitute your answer. Okay? All right, we'll move on to the last part, pardon. Right, last part is describe the embryological development of the anal canal. Right, again 20 marks. And this is a very famous question. Now you know that it develops in two parts. And you mentioned the origin of the upper part, endoderm of the hindgut. Lower part is from the ectoderm. That is why the anal canal have this dual nerve supply, blood supply, everything, right? And you have to mention the fact that there's an endodermal-like cavity at the terminal end of the hindgut, which is separated from the outside by cloacal membrane, right? And to this structure, the cloaca, two tracts open into terminal part of the hindgut and part of urogenital sinus, right? That communicates with the allantois, right? So the anterior part is the urogenital, posterior part is anal, anorectal, right? So highlighting all these things will carry marks for each and every step, right? Then you have to mention about the formation of this septum, how this common sac and the tract will be separated into two, right? Formation of urorectal septum. Samaru kirane මේකට urogenital septum කියලා කියනවා, which comes up and fuse with the cloacal membrane, and point of fusion forms the perineal body. And the two tracts will have two separate exits, right? And you can mention that the perforation of the cloacal membrane sides the side of anal valves, and the I forgot, the rest of the ectoderm in the vicinity will form the remaining half of the anal canal, right? So you can distribute your marks and a few congenital anomalies. If you mention just to incorporate anus, that would be enough, right? And again, for this question also, I prefer this diagram because it explains itself. And if you draw that, if I am marking the paper, I get the impression that this person knows what is behind it. ඇත්තටම මේ question එකට ළමයින්ට ලකුණු හම්බුනේ එහෙම තමයි හුඟක්. Some people have written it, but most of the people who have drawn it scored marks. But your diagram should be properly labeled. Right? Examiner label කරන්න තියන්න එපා. Right? Okay. Only 16 people have put their attendance registration numbers to the chat. And there are 55. Please enter your registration number. Otherwise, those people who have the registration numbers here will only be marked as present. Right? So I'm going to stop there. I discussed the 2 questions. Mark your answers. Right? Now itself, if you couldn't mark the answers during the time we were discussing, spend about half an hour to mark your answer and see how many marks that you have scored. This should be totally from 200 now. So you can get a self-assessment. And if you are not scored well, you can again time for 1 hour and answer this question again. Okay?
Okay, madam.
Right? Shall we stop there?
Okay, madam.
Right. Study well, use this time to study and revise everything. I'm hoping to do the 2 neuropracticals online as well. Then we have almost completed the course. Right? Okay, see you. Take care.
Thank you, madam.
Welcome.
Thank you, madam.
I hope all of you have entered your names there, no? Right. Okay, we'll stop there.
Thank you, madam.
Welcome.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Okay, see you.
Recording